For anyone who lived through the late 70s or maybe studied American social history,
Right.
the name Etan Patz, it immediately brings specific things to mind.
Absolutely. Indelible images.
Yeah, a missing child, that face on a milk carton, this kind of sudden national wake-up call.
Mhm.
But, beyond those really powerful public memories, there's this complex legal story, a saga, really, and it's still evolving even now. There was a pretty stunning appeals court decision recently.
That's right.
So today, we're not just looking back at the tragedy of May 25th, 1979. We're going to dive deep into how this one case fundamentally reshaped, well, everything from American parenting to the actual rules of police interrogations.
You're absolutely right. That initial shockwave from Eaton's disappearance, it just rippled through society.
Yeah.
And it kept going for decades.
Yeah.
So for our deep dive today, our mission is really to unpack not just the tragedy itself, but how this single case became, a national symbol, how it spurred huge legislative change.
Right.
And ultimately how these recent legal twists, they keep challenging how we understand justice and memory too.
And it's a story that really kicks off with a moment that just changed everything. A seemingly ordinary Friday in New York City, May 25th, 1979.
Mm-hmm.
6-year-old Etan Patz, probably excited, maybe a little nervous. He walked alone for the very first time to his bus stop in Soho.
And he was never seen again.
Never seen again. The immediate impact was just devastating. A shockwave through his family, and then ripples of fear just spread across the whole city.
It's really quite remarkable how one child's disappearance became the catalyst for a whole national movement.
Yeah.
Before Eton, missing children often felt like these isolated sort of local tragedies.
Right.
But Etan Patz's case, it was pioneering in its publicity. His smiling face became instantly recognizable. It turned his disappearance into this national symbol seen by millions.
Indeed. We all think of that iconic image, his face on milk cartons across the country.
Yeah, everywhere.
And that simple act, it wasn't just about finding Etan. It fundamentally shifted how America saw childhood safety. It ushered in, really, an entire age of parental anxiety.
Totally. Parents were, understandably, terrified by what seemed like this pervasive new threat, and they drastically changed their behaviors.
Oh, completely. Suddenly, letting your kids walk alone to school or play unsupervised in the neighborhood, that became a thing of the past.
Yeah, a relic.
It was quickly replaced by widespread stranger danger programs and, just a much tighter leash on childhood independence.
And what's truly striking here is how the Patz family's personal tragedy, it translated into systemic action. Eaton's parents, Julie and Stan Patz, they became these tireless advocates.
Incredible strength.
Really. Their efforts were instrumental in pushing for new laws. Things like establishing a national hotline for missing children, which was truly groundbreaking back then.
Huge deal.
And significant improvements in how law enforcement agencies shared information, across state lines, across jurisdictions. It really created a foundation for how we handle missing persons cases today.
And that momentum, it didn't stop there, did it?
No, not at all. The movement gained even more traction with other heartbreaking high-profile cases, like the kidnapping and killing of 6-year-old Adam Walsh in Florida in 1981.
Another name everyone recognizes.
Exactly. Adam's father, John Walsh, he famously channeled his grief into action, founded the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, hosted America's Most Wanted.
Which amplified the cause to just an unprecedented degree. It became this powerful cultural force.
Right. But this collective societal shift also led to something else, something some legal scholars now look back on, maybe critically, as overcorrections in the legal system.
Okay, how so?
Well, in the wake of these tragedies, we saw more expansive definitions of neglect and abandonment start to emerge in the law. This meant increased scrutiny on parental choices, things like letting kids play unsupervised. It led to what some called inadequate supervision cases against parents.
Right, I remember hearing about some of those.
And while some of those findings have been challenged successfully over time, it really reflects a powerful cultural transformation. Critics argue that this pendulum swing, aimed at greater child safety, might have inadvertently led to what they call permanent overcorrections, redefining parental freedom and maybe the very idea of childhood independence in America.
It's a complex legacy, so decades have passed since 1979, and one of the most agonizing, just enduring aspects of this case is the fact that Etan Patz's body has never been found.
Never. Despite an exhaustive search spanning decades, literally reaching as far as Israel, he was legally declared dead in 2001.
And that absence of a body, just cast this incredibly long shadow. It's complicated every single step of the investigation.
Absolutely. And the investigation's focus, it shifted dramatically over the years. Initially, back in '79, Pedro Hernandez. He was an 18-year-old stock clerk at a convenience store right near Epan's bus stop.
Okay.
Police interviewed him briefly, but he wasn't considered a suspect then, and that lead just went cold. It took more than 3 decades until a new tip surfaced in 2012 for Hernandez to really come back into the picture.
And it wasn't just Hernandez they looked at over those years, right?
No, not at all. For many years, the FBI had a longtime suspect, Jose Ramos, a convicted pedophile who had actually dated Etan's babysitter.
Wow. Okay. That's a close connection.
Very. And Ramos made some incredibly disturbing, incriminating statements back in 1991. He hinted at interacting with a child who looked like Etan on the day he disappeared. He even admitted to molesting the babysitter's own son.
Just chillin'.
Yet, despite those admissions, Ramos was never criminally charged in Etan's case. There was just a persistent lack of physical evidence and also some complex jurisdictional issues.
And this just highlights that critical, consistent challenge for the prosecution, doesn't it, through all these decades?
It really does. The near-total absence of physical evidence directly linking any suspect to Etan's disappearance.
Right.
For instance, also in 2012, investigators excavated the basement workshop of another man, Othniel Miller. His property was near Etan's home. A scent dog had detected human decomposition there.
But again...
Ultimately, Miller was never charged either. So once the focus finally narrowed onto Pedro Hernandez, the entire case against him, it would come to hinge exclusively on his purported confessions to the crime.
Which means the reliability, the circumstances surrounding those statements, they become absolutely crucial.
Paramount.
Okay, so here's where the story takes that sharp turn into really intense controversy. The confessions of Pedro Hernandez. In 2012, after all those decades of silence, Hernandez confessed. He said he lured Etan into the bodega basement with a soda, choked him, put the boy who he claimed was still alive into a plastic bag and then a box.
And then left it in a nearby alley.
Yeah. And what struck so many people was how his recorded confessions were described. They said he was calm and composed, almost unsettlingly so, like he was just recounting some mundane task.
And that perceived composure or lack of emotion became a key point of contention. The defense's core argument against these confessions was pretty compelling.
What was it?
They argued these were the false imaginings of a man with significant documented mental illness and a very low IQ.
Okay, tell us more about that.
Well, Hernandez had a documented history, including psychotic disorder, a diagnosis of schizophrenia or maybe bipolar disorder, chronic mental illness, and documented memory impairment. His IQ was reportedly between 67 and 76.
Which is very low.
Extremely low. It places him in the lowest 1 to 5 percentile compared to others his age. And the defense argued this made him especially susceptible to confessionary hallucinations and also critically susceptible to undue influence during interrogation.
And the interrogation tactics themselves, they came under really heavy scrutiny.
They did.
Hernandez was questioned for roughly 7 hours. 7 hours of unwarned questioning by detectives before any Miranda warnings were given.
A very long time.
Yeah. And during this period, the defense pointed to what they saw as manipulative tactics. Detectives reportedly invoked his religious faith, saying things like, "That's the strength of the Lord." They used physical contact, rubbing his head, touching his shoulders. They even put Etan's missing person poster right there in front of him.
And throughout this time, Hernandez repeatedly said he wanted to go home. He felt he was there against his will.
And that really striking detail, the one that raised serious questions about his cognitive abilities, he asked the detective, "How do you spell choke?" when he was asked to write out his confession.
Yeah, that's quite something. And this brings us to what's known legally as the two-step confession process. This became the central legal challenge later on.
Explain that a bit.
Okay, so after that initial unwarned confession obtained over those 7 hours, detectives finally administered the Miranda warnings. But then they immediately asked him to just repeat his confession on tape.
Okay. Right after the warning.
Immediately after. And he did. Then he repeated it again hours later to an assistant district attorney. So this strategy, get a confession first, then give the Miranda warnings, then ask the suspect to repeat it. That's precisely what the appeals court would later zero in on.
And the inconsistencies, the doubts around his confessions, they didn't stop there, did they?
No, they didn't. His prior statements to other people, like a church member, a neighbor, his first wife, about killing someone back in New York City, they varied wildly in detail. And crucially, none of them were reported to police at the time.
Interesting.
Furthermore, his statements to doctors after his arrest showed conflicting details about the incident itself. And he reportedly mentioned experiencing command hallucinations and seeing visions of his dead mother's ghost.
What?
So all of this significantly complicated the prosecution's case, which really relied almost entirely on those confessions as definitive proof.
So, okay, let's fast forward to the legal battles that followed this. Hernandez's first trial, that was in 2015. It ended in a hung jury, right? After 18 days of deliberation.
That's right. Clearly, the jury struggled with the reliability of that confession.
But then in the second trial in 2017, the jury ultimately convicted him. Felony murder and first-degree kidnapping. Though, notably, they acquitted him of intentional murder.
An important distinction. And he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison.
But as we now know, that wasn't the end of the story.
Not by a long shot. The case landed before the Second Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. And on July 21st, 2025, just recently, that court overturned the conviction.
And the reason?
Flawed jury instructions.
Yeah.
Instructions that the court found essentially undermined the fairness of the entire trial.
And the core of that appeal, the absolute pivotal moment that shaped this outcome, it revolved around a specific question the jury asked while they were deliberating.
Yes, a jury note.
They sent a note to the judge asking, basically, if they must disregard the later videotaped confessions if they found that the initial pre-Miranda confession was not voluntary.
A critical question.
Absolutely critical. And the judge's simple answer to that question was just no.
Just no. Now, this raises an important question about the federal law that applies here. The appeals court found that simple no instruction was clearly wrong and manifestly inaccurate under established federal law. Specifically, the Supreme Court's Missouri v. Seibert precedent from 2004.
Okay, Missouri v. Seibert. Break that down for us.
Sure. For those maybe not deep in the legal jargon, Seibert essentially addresses this exact two-step interrogation tactic we've been talking about.
Okay.
It's what happens when an unwarned confession is intentionally obtained first, then Miranda warnings are given, and then the police ask the suspect to simply repeat the confession they already gave.
Right.
The Supreme Court ruled in Seibert that those post-warning confessions, the repeated ones, are generally inadmissible in court unless specific curative measures are taken by the police.
Curative measures. What does that mean in practice?
It means real, impactful steps to break the chain from that initial unwarned confession. It could be a significant break in time between the questioning sessions, a change in location or interrogators, or critically, an additional warning given to the suspect explaining that their earlier unwarned statements might actually not be admissible in court.
So basically, the police need to properly reset the situation to make sure the Miranda warning actually has its intended protective effect.
Exactly. And the appeals court, looking at Hernandez's case, found that no sufficient curative measures were taken between his first unwarned confession and his immediate second Mirandized confession.
No real break, no chain.
Pretty much continuous. And while there was a time gap before his third confession to the assistant district attorney, Hernandez had remained in the continuous presence of law enforcement. He was likely mentally and physically exhausted, and crucially, he was not explicitly told his prior statements might be inadmissible.
So the chain of events wasn't broken in the way Seibert requires.
Precisely. The appeals court concluded that this error in the judge's instruction just saying no was not harmless. This is a key legal finding. It means the error was so significant that it likely affected the trial's outcome.
And their reasoning?
Their reasoning was that the prosecution's entire case rested squarely on the confession's credibility. There was essentially no other direct evidence linking Hernandez to the crime.
Right.
And the fact that the first trial ended in a hung jury, and the second jury took a very long time to deliberate and even acquitted him of intentional murder, all that underscored just how crucial those confessions were to their final decision.
So the court felt the error couldn't be ignored.
They stated quite strongly that no fair-minded jurist could conclude that the error was harmless beyond a reasonable doubt.
Wow. So what does this all mean for the Etan Patz case right now? Where does it stand?
Well, the ruling mandates a new trial for Pedro Hernandez within a reasonable period. Or, alternatively, his release.
A new trial or release?
Yes. His lawyers are, understandably, planning to appeal his conviction regardless, likely aiming for a dismissal. But this decision throws the entire case back into profound uncertainty. It raises these deep questions about whether true justice can ever really be achieved decades later, especially when the core evidence is so contentious.
This deep dive into the Etan Patz case, it really reveals its enduring, just multifaceted legacy, doesn't it?
It really does. Its profound impact on child safety awareness, its role in shaping how parents raise their kids, and these continuous complex legal battles. It's a case that just refuses to settle, forcing us constantly to grapple with these difficult questions about law, about memory, about truth.
Yeah. Over 4 decades later, Etan Patz's body is still unfound. The conviction of his confessed killer is now overturned. The case remains this stark, really painful reminder of the immense challenges in seeking justice when definitive answers are just elusive, and the foundational evidence is so highly debated. It makes you think, what does it mean for us, for society, when a case that's so deeply etched into our collective memory just keeps evolving through the lens of legal precedent? It pushes us to constantly reevaluate that balance between public safety, individual rights, and the pursuit of truth itself.
A difficult balance.
It really is, and it raises that important question for all of us to consider. In the absence of physical evidence, how much weight should the justice system place on confessions? Especially confessions from individuals with documented mental vulnerabilities, particularly when those confessions are obtained under circumstances that draw such intense scrutiny.
A question with no easy answer, and one that this case forces us to confront again and again.